The median American between 55 and 64 has $134,000 saved for retirement. $134,000. Now let that hit you differently. At a 4% withdrawal rate, $134,000 generates $5,360 per year. That translates to $446 per month, every single month, for the rest of your life. That is the retirement plan. That is what most people are building right now, with every single paycheck they receive. The number should terrify you more than it comforts you. Most people have no benchmark at all. They contribute something to their 401k, and they avoid doing the calculation. They avoid knowing the real number. They tell themselves they will worry about it later. Later never comes until you are 65 and the later has run out. Buffett said it clearly. Risk comes from not knowing what you are doing. Not knowing the exact number is not ignorance. It is not innocent optimism. It is risk, pure risk. It is flying a plane in the dark and hoping the ground underneath is friendly. Most people are flying blind, and they do not even know it. This video is your benchmark, and this is exactly what we are building together. We are going to break this down age by age, number by number. What Buffett would say you should have saved at every decade of your life, what the Federal Reserve data shows people actually have. The gap between those two numbers, and the most important part, what to do with that gap, whether it points in your favor or against you. The gap is information. Information changes everything. By the end, you will have a number that is actually yours, a real number based on your real life and real circumstances. If this way of thinking about money resonates with you, subscribe to this channel. This is where we break down how the financial machine actually works. How does a savings benchmark actually work? It is not a fixed dollar amount. $100,000 means something completely different if you earn $50,000 a year versus someone who earns $500,000 a year. $100,000 would be impossible for the first person and trivial for the second. A real benchmark cannot be static like that. It has to be relative to something that matters to you. It works as a multiple of your income. The reason is simple and mathematical. Your spending follows your income. When you earn $50,000 a year, you design your life around $50,000. When your income doubles, your life expands. Your home is bigger, your car is newer, your coffee is better. That is how human spending works. Fidelity, T. Rowe Price, and Vanguard have all independently built the same model across millions of Americans. They say 1 times your salary by age 30, 3 times your salary by age 40, 6 times your salary by age 50, 8 times your salary by age 60, and 10 times your salary by age 67. These benchmarks apply to your actual life. Behind every single number sits the 4% rule. This comes from the Trinity study, published back in 1998. It is the mathematical foundation that determines whether you can actually retire or whether you will run out of money. Here is exactly how it works. If you have $1 million saved and you withdraw 4% of it per year, that is $40,000 annually. You can spend $40,000 per year forever, and the money lasts. That is the rule. So reverse engineer it. If you want $60,000 per year in retirement, you need to divide by 4%. That means $1.5 million. $200,000 per year, $8 million needed. This is the equation behind every number you will hear in this video. The formula is simple, and it never changes. Your savings goal equals your desired retirement income multiplied by 25. That is all you need to know mathematically. 3 different accounts with 3 different functions. This is crucial to understand. First is your emergency fund, 3 to 6 months of living expenses in cash or a savings account. This does not count toward your retirement benchmark. It is separate, it is protection. Second is your investment portfolio, a taxable brokerage account where you buy stocks, index funds, bonds, whatever you choose. This does count. Third is your retirement accounts, your 401k, from your employer, your traditional IRA, your Roth IRA. These also count. The benchmark measures only investments and retirement accounts combined. It does not measure your checking account. It does not measure your emergency fund. It does not measure your car or your house or your possessions. The benchmark is solely about assets that generate income and growth. Know the difference between a net worth number and a retirement number. Here is what counts and what does not when you are calculating your retirement readiness. The 401k counts. The Roth IRA counts. The brokerage account counts. The checking account does not. The savings account with your emergency fund does not. The car does not. The house is an asset, but it does not generate income unless you sell it or rent it out. Home equity is wealth, but it is not retirement income. This distinction matters more than you think because most people confuse net worth with financial security. You can have $200,000 in home equity and $2,000 in investments and feel rich. Then retirement comes and the house cannot generate the monthly income you need. You are forced to sell it or move. That was not freedom. That was a trap disguised as progress. That was being rich on paper. The taxable versus non-taxable distinction is the hidden architecture of decades of compounding. Most people ignore it completely. Here is what it means in concrete dollars and cents. $50,000 in a Roth IRA. You contribute with after-tax money today, but the money grows tax-free forever. Grow that $50,000 at 10% for 40 years, and you have $2,262,000. You withdraw every single dollar completely tax-free. That entire $2.2 million is yours. No taxes, none. Now take the same $50,000 and put it in a regular taxable brokerage account. It grows to the exact same $2.2 million. But here is the difference. Every gain along the way is taxable. The dividends are taxable. The capital gains when you sell are taxable. At retirement, when you withdraw, you owe taxes on everything. The container, not the contents, but the container itself, is a decision with decades of consequence. Most people never even know this container exists. If you recognize where you stand on this timeline right now, write in the comments, "I know my benchmark." Buffett was 21 years old and he had $10,000 saved. In today's money, that is roughly $120,000. At age 22, he opened his first investment partnership. By the time he was 30, he was worth approximately $1 million. In today's dollars, that is around $12 million. He did not treat his 20s as a financial waiting period. He did not say, "I will start saving when I have a real job, or when I get married, or when I feel ready." He treated his 20s as the mathematically most valuable decade of his entire life. He was correct then, and he is correct now. By 25 years old, your goal is an emergency fund of 3 to 6 months of expenses, plus the habit, the actual action, not the intention, of contributing to a retirement account. It does not have to be huge. It has to be consistent, week after week, month after month. By 30 years old, your goal is 1 times your annual salary accumulated in investments and retirement accounts combined. It does not matter if that money is in a 401k or a Roth or a brokerage account. It counts. On a $55,000 salary, that means $55,000 sitting in 401ks and index funds and retirement accounts on your 30th birthday. That is the benchmark. $1 invested at age 22 versus $1 invested at age 32. Same 10% annual return, different time horizons. The one invested at 22 has 40 years to grow. The one at 32 has 30 years. At age 62, the first dollar is worth $45.26. The second dollar is worth $17.45. The same dollar, invested 10 years earlier, is worth 2.6 times more. Your 20s are the most financially valuable decade you will ever have in your entire life. Most people completely waste them believing they have time to catch up later. They do not. Time is the one asset you cannot manufacture. Two profiles. Same amount contributed, same return rate. Profile A starts saving $200 per month at age 22. Profile B starts the exact same contribution at age 32. Both earn 10% annual returns. Both continue until age 65. Profile A ends up with $1,264,000. Profile B ends up with $471,000. The 10-year delay costs $893,000. But here is the part that matters. It is not from the $24,000 they did not contribute over those 10 years. It is from what those $24,000 would have become over 33 additional years of compounding. The delay does not cost $24,000. It costs the $893,000 that money would have generated. That is the power of time. That is why your 20s are irreplaceable. That is why this decade matters more than you think. The Roth IRA in your 20s is a specific advantage most people miss completely. Your 20s are low-income years. Low-income years are Roth years. A Roth is funded with money you have already paid taxes on, taxed at your low 20-something tax rate, and then it grows completely tax-free forever. $6,000 contributed to a Roth at age 22, growing at 10%, becomes $271,000 by age 62. Every single dollar is withdrawn completely tax-free. Zero tax bill, no taxes. The alternative, a traditional IRA, grows tax-deferred but is taxed when you withdraw at retirement. You probably will not be in a lower tax bracket at 65 than you are at 25. You will be in a higher one, so you locked in a high tax rate by choosing wrong when you were young. The Roth is the tax weapon of your 20s. The reality versus benchmark in your 20s is where the first gap appears for most people. Federal Reserve data from 2022 shows the median person between 25 and 34 has approximately $10,000 saved. Most of that is in a checking account or a savings account earning basically nothing, not even 1%. The benchmark at age 30 is 1 times your salary. At the median income of $55,000, the benchmark is $55,000 invested. The gap is roughly $45,000. That $45,000 gap invested at 10% for 35 years becomes $1,120,000 in lost wealth. That is not the gap. That is what the gap becomes. That is what you give up by not closing it in your 20s when time is on your side. If this is giving you clarity about where you stand, let me know by liking this video. It tells me this work is worth continuing. Now here is where it gets harder, and reality pushes back hard. The 30s benchmark is more demanding than the 20s benchmark is. Fidelity says 1 times your salary at age 30 and 3 times your salary by age 40. On a $70,000 salary, that means $70,000 at 30 and $210,000 at 40. You need to triple your wealth in a single decade. That is not impossible, but it requires discipline, serious discipline. It requires maintaining a savings rate of 15 to 20% of your gross income for the entire decade, every single year. Most people cannot do this, not because they cannot afford it, because their lifestyle expands the moment their income rises. Why do the 30s feel so much harder financially? Mortgages, kids, career pressure, competing obligations everywhere. The same $55,000 salary that felt manageable at 25 feels insufficient at 32 after the mortgage payment and daycare costs and everything else. Your lifestyle expanded, your obligations expanded, but the benchmark does not adjust downward because your life got more complicated. The benchmark stays the same. That is the mathematical reckoning decade. That is when the gap between what you saved in your 20s either helps you or haunts you. This is when the decision you made at 23 shows up as either freedom or regret. The 401k employer match in your 30s is the last guaranteed return most people will ever see in their working lives. If your employer matches 50 cents per dollar on the first 6% of salary and you earn $75,000 a year, then you contribute $4,500 to the 401k and your employer adds $2,250. That is a guaranteed 50% return before the market does anything. You have not bought a single stock. You have not made a single investment decision. You have already doubled your money. Not capturing the employer match is a guaranteed loss. It is the only pure arbitrage available to an employee. Most people leave it completely on the table without thinking about it. The debt versus investment decision becomes real in your 30s, and it is not always simple or clear. If you have high-interest debt, credit cards, payday loans, anything above 7 or 8%, pay it off before you invest beyond the 401k match. That is the priority. But if you have low-interest debt, a mortgage at 3 to 5%, student loans at 4 to 6%, then here is the question you need to answer. What is your expected investment return? Historical market returns are around 10%. If you can borrow at 5% and invest at 10%, the math says invest while paying the minimum. Your expected return exceeds your cost of debt. The dividing line is simple: debt rate versus investment return. If your debt costs more than you can earn, eliminate it first. The median American between 35 and 44 has $45,000 saved, according to Federal Reserve data from 2022. That is the real number. The Fidelity benchmark at 35 is 2 times your salary. On a $70,000 income, that is $140,000. The gap is $95,000. At 10% for 30 years, that $95,000 gap becomes $1,654,000 by retirement. The gap is not static. The gap compounds against you using the exact same mechanism that would have compounded in your favor if you had closed it in your 20s. That is how the math works. The income window in your 30s and early 40s is the sweet spot most people completely waste. Income typically accelerates in the late 30s and early 40s. That is the window, right then, right there, to raise your savings rate above the minimum pace needed to hit the benchmarks. Buffett has a saying, "The time to repair the roof is when the sun is shining." Your 30s are typically the most financially sunny decade you will have. You are healthy. Your kids are young and in school, not college yet. Your parents probably are not yet requiring elder care. Healthcare costs are low. That window closes fast. Use it while it is open and available to you. If you understand the math but feel stuck on how to actually start moving these numbers in your own life, check the first pinned comment below this video. It is for people who are serious about changing this. The benchmark for your 40s gets harder again, and it starts to feel like continuous work that never ends. Fidelity says 3 times your salary at age 40 and 6 times your salary at age 50. On an $80,000 salary, that is $240,000 at 40 and $480,000 at 50. You need to increase your wealth by 3 times your annual salary in a single decade. You need to go from 3 to 6. That is not just saving. That is tripling. Only possible with high contribution rates and compounding running without interruption. Here is the psychological trap of your 40s that gets most people stuck in complacency. Most people in this age range feel more financially confident than they did a decade before. They have equity in their house now. They have a 401k that looks substantial when they look at the balance. Their salary feels meaningful. That confidence is frequently the most dangerous moment financially. The benchmark reveals what confidence hides: the gap between what you have and what you actually need to retire comfortably. Confidence is not data. The benchmark is data. The Federal Reserve data shows the median person, 45 to 54, has $115,000 saved. Really think about that number, 115,000. The benchmark at 45 is 4 to 5 times your salary. On a $70,000 income, that is $280,000 to $350,000. The gap is $205,000 to $285,000. Take a $200,000 gap and run it at 10% for 20 years. That gap grows to $1,346,000. The gap is not something you are behind on. The gap is something that is compounding against you every single day. Every year you do not close it, the future consequence grows. The recovery math in your 40s is still possible, but the numbers get tighter every single year. To close a $200,000 gap with 25 years remaining at 10%, you need approximately $222 per month extra in contributions. That is not overwhelming, not at all, but every year you delay, that number climbs fast. At 50, the same gap requires approximately $588 per month. At 55, approximately $1,350 per month. The cost of delay is not linear. It is exponential. It compounds harder with each passing year. Every year of delay makes the next dollar cost more to fix. The playbook for your 40s is specific and non-negotiable if you are behind. Maximize the 401k. In 2024, that is $23,500 per year. Eliminate consumer debt completely. Credit cards, car loans, student loans if possible. Increase your income through skill development, not just tenure at your job. Learn something that makes you more valuable. When your salary rises, resist the temptation to let your lifestyle rise equally. For every pay raise in your 40s, allocate at least 50% of the increase to savings instead of lifestyle. Buffett takes $100,000 per year as his salary from Berkshire Hathaway, not because he cannot authorize himself a higher salary, but because he has chosen to live below his means at every single income level. The 40s have one irreplaceable asset, and it is not money at all. It is time and the power of compounding. 25 years of compounding still remain between 40 and 65. $100,000 invested at age 40 at 10% becomes $1,083,000 at 65. The same $100,000 invested at age 50 becomes only $418,000. The difference is massive, and it is purely a function of time. The 40s are not too late, but they are the last decade where compounding still has maximum force. The engine still has full power. Use that power while it is available. The 50s benchmark accelerates significantly and the intensity increases noticeably. Fidelity says 6 times your salary at 50 and 7 times your salary at 55. On an $85,000 salary, that is $510,000 at 50 and $595,000 at 55. But here is the crucial context. Social Security in 2024 pays an average benefit of $1,907 per month. That is $22,884 per year. That covers roughly 40% of the average American's pre-retirement expenses. The remaining 60% must come from your personal savings. That is the gap Social Security does not fill. The catch-up contributions were designed specifically for your 50s, and they exist for a mathematical reason. Congress created them because they understood the math. In 2024, workers 50 and older can contribute $31,000 to a 401k. That is the standard $23,500 plus $7,500 in catch-up. Additionally, you can contribute $8,000 to an IRA, $7,000 standard plus $1,000 catch-up. The Internal Revenue Service created these higher limits specifically because they recognized most Americans undersave in their 20s, 30s, and 40s. The catch-up is a formal acknowledgement that the math demands you accelerate. It is the fastest legal way to close a gap in your final working window. How much is $1 saved at age 50 worth at age 65? At 10% annual return over 15 years, that dollar becomes $4.18. The window is shorter, but the multiplier still works. $50,000 saved at 50 becomes $209,000 at 65. $50,000 saved at 55 becomes $129,000. Each year of delay costs you approximately 10% of the terminal value. In dollars, a one-year delay on $50,000 at this stage costs roughly $20,000 in future value. Every single year counts here. There are no do-overs. There are no second chances to go back. The reality of your 50s shows exactly where the acceleration matters most. Federal Reserve data from 2022 shows the median person, 55 to 64, has $134,000 saved. We started this video with that number. That is the data. The benchmark at 55 is 7 times your salary. On average income around $85,000, that is $420,000 to $595,000. The gap is $286,000 to $461,000. With only 10 to 15 years of compounding remaining, closing that gap requires both maximum contribution rates and elimination of any financial behavior that works against the engine. That means no consumer debt, no subscription creep, no lifestyle inflation, nothing that drains the engine. The 50s are when the math becomes urgent and real, and it cannot be ignored anymore. Not punishing, not panic-inducing. Urgent. Urgent is different from those emotions. Urgency is clarity. A dollar saved at 52 compounds more powerfully than one saved at 57. A decision made this year has more mathematical impact than one made in 5 years. Urgency is not emotion. Urgency is precision about what the next 10 years represent mathematically. Urgency is clarity about what matters. At 55, with $134,000 saved, every month of inaction is costing thousands of future dollars. But here is the income extension strategy that most people do not even consider as an option. Every additional year of working in your 50s does 3 things simultaneously. First, it increases your contributions. More money is coming in. Second, it reduces the number of years you need to withdraw from the portfolio. Fewer years draining. Third, it potentially increases your Social Security benefit if those are high-earning years. Work 1 more year and your Social Security calculation might improve. Vanguard calculated that working just 3 additional years can have the same mathematical impact as doubling your savings rate for 10 years. Extension does not mean working full-time forever. It means part-time consulting, freelance work, semi-active income. Keep the inflow engine running while you delay the outflow engine. That is the math of the 50s. The 60s benchmark is your final reckoning with the number. Fidelity says 8 times your salary at 60 and 10 times your salary at 67. On an $85,000 salary, that is $680,000 at 60. At a 4% withdrawal rate, $680,000 generates $27,200 per year. Add your Social Security of $22,884, and your total retirement income is $50,084 per year. The question is simple. Does $50,000 per year match your expected retirement lifestyle? If it does, you are on track. If not, the gap is calculable and you can still act. The sequence of returns risk becomes real in your 60s, and it changes everything about how you should invest. A 30% market drop at age 43 is not the same catastrophe as a 30% market drop at age 63. At 43, You have 22 years of contributions and recovery ahead. You can ride out the volatility. At 63, you may be withdrawing from the same portfolio that just crashed. You sell assets at depressed prices to fund your living expenses. That is the worst possible timing. Buffett has a principle about this. Never be in a position where someone else's decision about the market forces your decision about your life. In your 60s, that means holding 2 to 3 years of living expenses in cash or short-term treasury bonds, completely isolated from market volatility. The money you need for the next 3 years is not in stocks. It is safe. The Social Security timing decision impacts your entire retirement, and it is not trivial in the slightest. Claim at age 62, and you get the lowest possible benefit, permanently reduced 25 to 30% from your full retirement age amount. Wait until age 70, and the benefit increases 8% per year from your full retirement age amount. On a $2,000 monthly benefit at your full retirement age of 67, waiting until 70 increases you to $2,480 per month, permanently, for life. The break-even point is approximately age 80. If you live past 80, waiting was mathematically the correct choice. If you die before 80, claiming early was optimal. It is a longevity bet you must make. Here is the insight most people miss about retirement completely. Most people see age 67 and retirement as the finish line. Everything stops. Life ends in one form and a new form begins. Buffett thinks about it completely differently. He is 94 years old and still working, not because he has to, not because he needs the money, but because work is the engine. The financial insight here is not that you should work forever. The insight is that your building mindset does not stop at 67. Your portfolio keeps compounding whether you are working or not. Your Social Security benefit keeps waiting if you delay. The best financial decisions of your 60s are still compounding decisions. The engine does not retire when you do. Buffett's actual retirement framework is extraordinarily simple and elegant, and it is worth understanding completely. He said he would be completely comfortable with these 3 things: a fully paid-off house, $100,000 in treasury bills for liquidity and flexibility, and the rest in a Vanguard S&P 500 index fund. Not complicated. Not a complex multi-asset allocation. Not alternative investments or hedge funds or options strategies. The simplest possible structure that simultaneously provides income and growth. That simplicity, applied consistently over decades, is the framework he recommends. Not just for billionaires, for anyone. Your specific number is determined by exactly 3 variables and nothing more. Nothing less. 3 things. Variable 1. How much do you expect to spend annually in retirement? Not what you spend now. What you expect to spend when you are retired and have free time. Variable 2. What will you actually receive from Social Security? You can find this exact number at ssa.gov. Create an account, log in, and your precise Social Security projection is right there based on your actual earnings record. It is not estimated. It is calculated. Variable 3. At what age do you want to retire? 20 years of retirement is different from 40 years. From these 3 variables alone, your personal number is calculable with mathematical precision. The formula is almost embarrassingly simple once you have those 3 numbers in front of you. Take your target annual retirement spending. Subtract your annual Social Security income. That is the gap you need to fill from savings. Then divide that gap by 0.04. That is your savings goal. You want $70,000 per year in retirement. Social Security pays you $25,000. You need to generate $45,000 from your savings. 45,000 divided by 0.04 equals 1,125,000. That is your number. Not Fidelity's benchmark, not the median American's number, your number, the number that applies to your specific life. The lifestyle multiplier is where most people make critical miscalculations about retirement and future expenses. Every $1,000 per month in spending above your Social Security income requires $300,000 in savings. Every single thousand. Think about your expected lifestyle. 2 cars, regular dining out, annual vacations. That is roughly $3,000 to $4,000 per month in additional spending. That means $900,000 to $1.2 million in savings just to maintain that lifestyle. Every permanent $100 increase in monthly spending requires $30,000 more in your retirement savings goal. Lifestyle design in your 40s and 50s has profound consequences for your 60s and beyond. The healthcare cost that nobody includes in their calculation is a critical mistake people make repeatedly. Fidelity estimated in 2023 that the average retired American will spend $165,000 in healthcare costs during retirement. For a couple, that is $315,000. And that is before any long-term care costs. To cover $315,000 at a 4% withdrawal rate, you need to set aside enough that 4% equals the healthcare bill. That is about $7.9 million. Most people completely overlook this number in their calculations. The benchmark is not a judgment about you or your worth or your ability. It is not a criticism of who you are. It is a navigation instrument. It is an altimeter for pilots. A pilot without an altimeter is not free from altitude. They are just flying blind and hoping they do not crash into a mountain. Operating your financial life without a savings benchmark does not protect you from the consequences of being behind. It only delays the moment you discover the distance you need to close, usually when you have far less time to act. The benchmark gives you information. Information allows you to change course. Buffett explained this dynamic perfectly in his letters. He said the first 100,000 is the hardest to accumulate because the compounding is not yet visible to your eye. You contribute and it feels like nothing is happening. The engine is running, but the output is small. The first million feels different. Compounding produces visible results. You can see it working. With 10 million, the engine generates more than your work income. The engine is the same at every level. The time constant is the same. You just need to start it and keep it running consistently. Tonight, one calculation, current total saved, your benchmark number for your current age, the gap between them, the monthly contribution required to close that gap at 10% over your remaining years. 4 numbers, 20 minutes total. Most people reading this will never do this calculation. The people who have done it are making financial decisions based on reality. The people who have not are making decisions based on optimism and hope. Reality wins, hope loses. Mathematics wins, optimism loses. Most people who discover they are behind feel paralysis and freeze up completely. Buffett's entire approach to this is the opposite of paralysis. A gap is not a failure. A gap is information, and information is the prerequisite of action. Every single correct action taken now compounds toward the future. Every single one. The person who discovers a $150,000 benchmark gap in their 40s and takes action today is in a radically different position than that same person waiting 5 years to act. The gap grows with inaction. The gap shrinks with action. Your benchmark tells you which direction yours is moving. One concrete action you can take tonight right now before the video ends. Navigate to ssa.gov and create an account. The entire process takes less than 5 minutes. The number that appears when you log in is your real Social Security projection based on your actual earnings history. With that single number, the entire formula becomes simple. target annual retirement spending minus your Social Security benefit divided by 0.04 equals your personal savings goal. Subtract what you already have invested and you know the gap. Divide that gap by the number of months until your target retirement age and you know the monthly contribution required. 20 minutes of work, one real number that changes everything. Most people never do this calculation, but you can do it tonight, right now, before the video ends. If you made it here to the end, write in the comments, "I'm calculating my number." There is another video on your screen right now. The next step in understanding how wealth actually builds over time. Thank you for watching, and we will see you in the next one.